If I had known that wearing my daughter's favorite color would get me scolded like a stranger, I would have come in black and let the world guess who I buried. The music was loud, laughter sharp, lights low and glittering like secrets. And somewhere between the champagne tower and the wall of cameras, someone touched my elbow. "Margaret," the assistant whispered, eyes darting sideways. "Miss Carroll asked that you not mention, the relationship." The relationship, as if she hadn't come out of me, screaming and hungry, wrapped in a hospital blanket I still had folded in my closet. I blinked at the girl, no older than 22, balancing a clipboard in fear, and nodded. I didn't say I was her mother. I hadn't said a word to anyone. She didn't trust me to be invisible. I looked down at my dress. Navy polyester, careful pleats. I had bought it secondhand and hemmed the sleeves myself. A far cry from the silk structure and shimmer Laura dressed her models in. I thought the navy would remind her of the afternoons we'd spend in the kitchen sewing. Her favorite old apron had been the same shade. Apparently, it only reminded her of where she came from. I nodded again, tighter this time. "Of course," I whispered. My throat burned like I'd swallowed the pins from our old sewing kit. I stepped back and smiled politely at the assistant, who fled like she'd just extinguished a fire. I stood quietly by a ficus tree with fake soil and watched my daughter bathe in the light of her own legend. Camera flashes softened her jaw. Makeup powdered the truth. She looked like a woman who belonged there. And in that moment, I realized something she had worked very hard to make true. I didn't. She had erased me. From the bio, from the speech, from the launch video, even from the guest list. I had received a text from her assistant with the time and location. No invitation, no mom, just logistics. As I stood there invisible and obedient, I remembered how I had paid her tuition in thirds, morning janitor at the elementary school, afternoon waitress at May's Diner, and overnight cleaning offices downtown. I'd slept 4 hours a night for years, so she could chase the dream. But I wasn't part of the dream. I was the cautionary tale. A woman passed by and smiled. "Beautiful event, isn't it?" she said. I nodded. "Yes, my daughter built all this." "Oh, are you on the board?" she asked, genuinely curious. I paused, then lied. "Just a neighbor?" She patted my arm and drifted off toward the wine bar. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the refrigerator fill the room. For years, I kept moving forward because I thought the reward would be seeing her thrive. But now I was wondering if she had to erase me to feel successful, then what did that make me? A stepping stone, a shadow, a secret? I looked back at the photo of us laughing in those matching aprons. "No," I said quietly to the room. "I'm not a secret. I was the whole damn foundation." And I'd start reminding the world of that one stitch at a time. During my usual bingo night, Hilda didn't even let me sit down before she noticed. "You all right?" she asked, peering over her glasses as she dabbed a bingo dober on her card. "You've got that holding it together with dental floss look again." I tried to smile. Failed. "Long night," I muttered, sliding into the chair beside her and pulling out my own card. "Was it that fancy event?" "The one for your daughter's company," she whispered. "You were all excited about it last week." I hesitated, my dober hovering over the G column. "She asked me not to say I'm her mother," I said softly. Hilda stopped mid-dab. "What?" "She told her assistant to tell me. Said it would be better if the connection wasn't obvious." The silence between us wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy with the things Hilda didn't say right away. Then came the hiss. "That little peacock. Are you telling me she paraded you into a room full of strangers and made you pretend you were no one?" I nodded, eyes still glued to the card. She leaned in, lowering her voice, but not her fury. "You put that girl through school. You taught her to sew. You once walked 3 miles in a snowstorm because the bus driver wouldn't stop for someone in a diner uniform." I shrugged. "She's built a brand. Maybe she's just ashamed of where she came from." Hilda stared at me like I just spat on my own name. "Ashamed of you?" she snapped. "She should be ashamed of forgetting who bled to make her bloom." I didn't say anything, just stared at the empty B square on my card and felt a hollowness open up in my chest. I wasn't defending Laura. Not really. I was defending the version of her I used to believe in. The one who begged me to stay up late so she could finish a hem. Who kissed my hand after every school show, who whispered, "Someday they'll all know it was you who made me." But now it seemed she only wanted the world to think she made herself. And me? I had become a convenience, a caution, a background fixture whose job was to stay quiet and smile. I pressed the Dober hard onto the card. B12. Margaret, Hilda said, her voice softer now. You don't have to keep swallowing this for her. I looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were lined with age and kindness, and a sharpness only truth could polish. I know, I said. But if I let myself feel all of it right now, I don't know if I'd be able to stand. The game continued. Numbers called, voices shouted, daubers clicked. But I was already somewhere else entirely. Not planning revenge, not plotting a scene, just beginning to take measure of my silence, of my worth. The knock came around dusk. I was still in my slippers, peeling potatoes over the sink when I heard it. 3 soft raps, hesitant. When I opened the door, it was that same assistant from the party, Tessa. I think she was holding a cardboard box and looked like she'd run straight from the subway. Hi, miss. Her voice trailed off. She didn't know my last name. Of course she didn't. Margaret's fine, I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Can I help you? She looked relieved. I hope it's okay. Laura had a few leftover samples from last week's collection prep, and they were just going to get tossed, but I remembered your size. I thought you might like them. My chest tightened. That's very kind of you. She handed me the box but didn't leave right away. She lingered, shifting on her feet, biting the corner of her lip like something was trying to crawl out of her conscience. I raised an eyebrow. You all right? She started. I wanted to say I'm sorry. About the other night, I didn't know that you were her mom. I nodded slowly. Most people don't. Tessa swallowed hard. It's just that everyone at the office thinks you're, well, her old landlady. That's what Laura tells people when you visit. Says you're this sweet lady who always believed in her and lets her store stuff in your garage. My arms stiffened around the box. My face didn't move. Landlady. I felt something twist in my gut. So that's what I was, a cover story, a mask, a sanitized narrative that kept her brand clean and free of any messy truths about childhood poverty. Or a mother who once wore scrubs and cleaned up strangers' blood to keep tuition checks from bouncing. Sorry, Tessa said quickly, eyes wide. I shouldn't have said anything. After I saw you fixing the hem on that intern's pants during the shoot and how you brought cupcakes for the front desk girls last month, I thought maybe you were family, and when I found out the truth, it just felt wrong. I smiled, small, controlled. It was kind of you to tell me. She nodded, clearly still ashamed. If it helps, most of the staff adore you. You're the only one who asks their names. That's rare. I watched her leave, closed the door gently. Then I put the box on the table and sat beside it like it was a casket. Landlady. That's who she wanted me to be. Someone generous, anonymous, and entirely disposable. Not her mother. Not the woman who stitched her first blazer by hand at that same table, now covered in grocery store coupons and yesterday's coffee ring. I opened the box. Inside were 3 skirts and a jacket, all in pristine condition. Untouched samples that probably hadn't made the final cut. I ran my hand along the stitching. Not a single tag. Nothing with my daughter's name. It hit me then. They hadn't been gifts. They were offerings, peace tokens, leftovers. Because while I had once given her everything, now I was just the woman whose silence was convenient. And the worst part, I had accepted that role without even knowing it. Until now, I started showing at her company on Thursdays. Always with a paper bag in hand, always smiling, always pretending it was a casual visit. Just thought she might be hungry. I tell the receptionist I had leftovers, but what I really came for wasn't lunch. It was the look in Laura's eyes. And every time I saw it, the tight jaw, the flicker of panic behind her mascaraed eyes, the way she kept talking when I walked in, louder, faster, like my presence might dissolve if she pushed hard enough against it. Mom, she'd whisper under her breath, teeth barely parting. You can't just drop by. But I could. I had keys. I still paid half the property taxes on the building she swore she bought on her own. That detail hadn't made it into her Vogue profile either. I brought that soup you like, I'd say cheerfully, ignoring the edge in her voice. And some banana bread for your assistance. Then I'd sit in the tiny break room and sip tea while interns buzzed past me, whispering, "That's the landlady." Like I was part of the furniture. Landlady. The lie lingered in the walls like old paint. I watched Laura flit around in her designer boots, giving orders, taking meetings, posing for behind-the-scenes content, and I started noticing something else. She never introduced me. She'd walk past with clients, stylists, investors, never once gesturing my way, never once saying, "That's my mother." Just a polite nod at best. A silent plea in her eyes for me to stay put, like I might embarrass her if I moved too far into frame. Once I heard her say to someone on the phone, "Yes, it's complicated. No, not family. She's just someone who helped me early on, a supporter. I owe her a lot. I owed her everything. But to her, I was now just someone she managed." Still, I kept coming. Not out of pettiness, not even out of hope, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see how far she would go to keep me hidden, how deep the lie ran, and who she became when she thought I wasn't watching. Once I caught her adjusting a hem with a needle clutched between her teeth, just like I used to do, just like I taught her. And in that moment, she looked like the girl who once sat on the floor of our kitchen, begging me to show her how to sew pleats. And it struck me like a slap. She hadn't erased me. She'd buried me under image, under polish, under fear that being born from me would cost her the life she thought she deserved. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because every week I came back, I gathered something else, a look, a detail, a truth. And with every truth, I stitched the quiet outline of a reckoning she didn't see coming. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted her to finally see me, not as a ghost in the break room, but as the thread she stitched her empire with. It was a Wednesday, rainy, like the sky knew something I didn't yet. I had cleaned out the hall closet the night before. Old coats, puzzles with missing pieces, books no one had opened in a decade. I packed 3 boxes for Goodwill, tossed them in the car, and told myself it was just another small act of decluttering, just life moving on. But as I handed the box over to the clerk, one corner caught on my sleeve and ripped slightly. Something slid out onto the floor. I bent down to pick it up and froze. The sketchbook. Her sketchbook. It was the red spiral-bound one with the faded Lisa Frank stickers peeling off the front. The one she used from ages 6 to 10, filled with half-drawn princess gowns and marker-streaked runways. I had kept it tucked in the bottom of the closet for years. I must have shoved it in the donation box without looking. I should have let it go. I should have thanked fate for letting me catch it in time and just put it back in the car. But instead, I sat down right there on the curb in the drizzle and opened it. The pages were just as I remembered. Scribbles and swirls, little notes in a shaky hand, ruffles here, big bow, sparkle shoes, maybe. One page had a coffee ring, probably mine, from all those nights we stayed up designing doll clothes because we couldn't afford the real thing. And then on the very last page, the one I had forgotten existed, a crayon drawing. 2 stick figures, one tall, one short, sitting at a table with scissors and thread above it in large, wobbly letters. Mom taught me to sew. I covered my mouth. Not because I was going to cry. I'd already gone dry long ago, but because that one sentence undid something inside me. That sketch had come before fashion school, before press releases, before brand management and shame. That was the raw version of her. The one that remembered me clearly. She knew who I was. She knew what I gave. She just buried it. Because truth didn't look good in gloss. I drove home with the sketchbook in my lap, windshield wipers slapping like a metronome. When I got in, I placed the sketchbook on the table next to the photos on the fridge. The kitchen still smelled like last night's stew, like comfort, like memory. I whispered to the drawing. That's all I ever wanted to be remembered like that. Then I reached for my notebook, the same one where I'd started jotting thoughts since the night of that party, and wrote 6 words that came from somewhere deep. She buried me. I'm still breathing. I didn't know yet what those words meant, but I knew one day soon she would read them and recognize the handwriting. I didn't need an invitation to her world. I just started showing up like I belonged. At first, I'd bring a sandwich or coffee and leave it on the receptionist's desk. For whoever's hungry, I'd say. Then I'd sit in the corner of the lobby with a crossword puzzle and my old thermos of tea. No badge, no appointment, just presence. People started noticing. "Hey, Miss Margaret," one of the interns greeted one morning, holding the elevator for me. "You here to see the boss again?" I smiled. "Nope. Just soaking up the air conditioning." He laughed, but I caught the flicker of respect in his eyes. Not pity, respect. Like I was someone whose story mattered, even if he didn't know it yet. The security guard, Devin, started saving me the comfy seat near the window. "You've got the best posture of anyone in here," he said once. "Makes the place look more civilized." By the second week, people had stopped asking why I was there. I was just there, constant, warm, mysterious. I gave advice when someone looked nervous before a pitch. I complimented a designer's rough sketch that peeked out from her folio. I helped an assistant rewrite a frantic email and handed out band-aids from my purse when a model's new shoes tore up her ankles. They didn't know my last name, but they started calling me the Stitch Lady. One girl even asked if I gave private lessons. All the while, Laura avoided me like I was smoke and she'd forgotten how to breathe. She'd take the stairs when I was near the elevator, turn her back to me in the cafe line. I once caught her looking at me through the glass wall of the conference room, her mouth tight, fingers drumming, but she never said a word, not once. And I didn't push. I let my presence do the work. Because the thing about quiet women is this. People underestimate us. They think we're just background wallpaper, easy to ignore. But when you plant yourself in the middle of someone's carefully curated lie, when you show up every day dressed in truth, they start to unravel without you saying a single thing. One afternoon, a junior designer leaned over and whispered, "Were you one of her first investors? I've heard rumors." I looked her right in the eye and said, "In a way." I gave her her first pair of scissors. Her mouth dropped open like she just touched something sacred. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't there to haunt Laura. I was there to remind everyone else who stitched the first seam. The email came late. No subject, just a time and a room number. I didn't even blink when I read it. I knew what was coming. That Monday morning, I arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in the same navy dress she once said made me look sentimental. I smoothed the skirt, straightened my posture, and walked into the boardroom like I still owned part of the building. Because I did. Laura didn't look at me, not even when I said good morning. She sat at the head of the sleek glass table, flanked by 3 executives in black and one in pinstripes too young for his ambition. Her fingers tapped against the tablet in front of her. "This won't take long," she said without greeting, without warmth. One of the men cleared his throat and looked at me kindly enough. "Margaret, we appreciate your involvement with the company, but we've received concerns about, well, your presence in the building." My presence. I almost laughed. Another executive jumped in, eyes flitting toward Laura. "Some staff have expressed confusion about your role here, and from a PR standpoint, clarity is vital to the brand identity." Then Laura spoke. Her voice was a blade wrapped in silk. "You've always been important to me, Mom, but this isn't the place for nostalgia or personal narratives." Personal narratives. That's what she called me now. "I've spoken with our advisors," she continued. "Cool as ever, and we believe it might be time for you to consider support, a professional environment, something with structure, maybe even full-time assistants." My heart didn't drop. It hardened. "I see," I said, folding my hands neatly in my lap. "So, you think I'm a liability?" "I think you're tired," she said almost gently. "And lost." I looked her straight in the eyes. "You mean inconvenient?" The room went silent. Even the AC seemed to pause. "I brought you food. I spoke kindly to your staff. I sat in a lobby you built on my back. And now I'm the one who needs managing." Laura didn't flinch. "We all have our roles, Margaret. And mine," I said slowly, "was to disappear after you made it." She blinked. Then just once. The pinstripe boy tried to defuse it. "Look, No one's saying you've done anything wrong, but it's about perception, public image. This isn't personal. The way they all looked at me, I wasn't a person. I was a problem they needed out of frame. Laura slid a glossy pamphlet across the table. A brochure for some wellness residents, the kind with polished floors and fake smiles. Just something to think about, she said. I picked it up, looked at it, then tore it in half slowly, quietly, the way I used to rip the seam from her practice dresses when she got a hem. This is what I think, I said, laying the torn pieces neatly on the table. Then I stood, smoothed the skirt of my thrift store navy dress, and walked out. Not broken, not babbling, not crazy, just done playing the role she scripted for me. And in that moment, I knew something with terrifying clarity. If she wanted a version of success that required her mother to be locked away and erased, then I'd give her the kind of truth no brand consultant could bury. His name was Daniel Brooks, but I still called him Danny. Back when he was 9, I used to pack his school lunches because his foster home forgot he had allergies. His parents were gone in a car crash, and no one else remembered that Kiwi could kill him. I did. He's 39 now, partner at a law firm, dressed sharp, talks in clean lines and clause numbers. But when he saw me walk through his office door, his whole face softened like the little boy I used to sneak chocolate milk to behind the school cafeteria. "Margaret," he said, standing. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer right away. I just sat down and pulled out the folded memo from Laura's PR team, the one they tried to sneak under my door after that boardroom ambush. He read it slowly, expression unreadable. When he finished, he sat it down with a quiet weight. "You don't owe anyone your silence," he said. "I don't want to hurt her," I replied. "But I won't let her bury me alive either." Danny nodded. "You can tell your story, Margaret. No laws against that. Not unless you're lying. And something tells me you've never been a good liar." I smiled, but it didn't reach far. She called me unstable. Said I needed supervision. Like I'm a risk. His eyes flashed. "That's projection. You're not the one living a lie. She is. You're the truth. She doesn't know how to package it." I felt something shift in me, like a door creaking open that had been locked for years. "I want to tell my side," I said quietly. "Not to shame her. Just to remind the world who stitched the hem." Danny leaned forward. "Then you write it, you speak it, you shout it in a blog, a book, a street corner if you want. Hell, I'll host it on my firm's website if she tries to shut you up." I chuckled at that. He was still Danny, fierce, stubborn, loyal as ever. She used to tell people I was her inspiration. I said more to myself than him. Now she pretends I was never there. "Then remind them," he said, "and make sure they can't forget." He stood and came around the desk, reached into his pocket, and handed me a folded napkin from his lunch. On it, scribbled in pen, was a quote he said always reminded him of me. "Quiet doesn't mean weak. Some storms whisper before they strike." I stared at it, then at him, then at the idea growing loud in my chest. Maybe it was time the world met the real Margaret. Not through Laura's edits, but through the woman who once taught a girl how to dream with nothing but scraps and a borrowed sewing machine. Because being erased was one thing, letting it stand was another, and I wasn't letting it stand. Not anymore. I published the first post at 2:17 a.m. It was quiet. The kind of quiet where old wounds talk louder than clocks. I stared at the blinking cursor for half an hour before I typed the title. Stitched by Sacrifice. No name, no photos, no bio. Just the truth, dressed in plain words. That first entry was short, just a memory. She was 6 when she made her first hem. I held the fabric while her tiny hands pushed the needle through. She pricked herself and cried, but I told her. Every masterpiece starts with a little blood. I didn't name her. I didn't mention Laura, or the fashion house, or the boardroom where my motherhood was treated like a liability. I just told a story. By the 3rd post, I had 6 subscribers. By the 6th post, I had 600. And by the end of the 2nd week, there were thousands. Comments poured in from women who'd done what I'd done, given, stitched, bled, and vanished into the background of someone else's success. "You wrote my life," one woman said. "I thought I was the only mother left behind," wrote another. People didn't need her name. They recognized the heartbreak. Every entry was a layer. The night I walked miles home from the late shift just to catch her dress rehearsal, the peanut butter months when we couldn't afford meat, but she always had art supplies. The time she sobbed over a failed pattern, and I stayed up remaking it while she slept so she'd wake to triumph. Every story ended the same way, with her walking farther and me waving from behind. And yet people didn't see a martyr. They saw a mother, a real one, tired, quiet, unthanked, but never gone. I never wrote with bitterness. I wrote with precision. And people felt that. By the third week, a small design blog picked it up, calling it, quote, a haunting portrait of invisible labor behind female success. Then a local paper ran a piece, Who is the Stitching Ghost? Readers were captivated by the anonymous mother's memoir. I watched the shares climb. Not for fame, not for vengeance, but because the truth had finally found a voice, and it was mine. One morning, I saw a tweet with a quote from my latest post. You don't become a mother to be wiped, but you hope someday not to be deleted. Underneath, someone had written, Whoever you are, you deserve to be seen. And for the first time in years, I felt it. I wasn't just being seen. I was being heard loudly, widely, and without Laura's permission. The first time they asked me to speak, I nearly said no. A local podcast had reached out, Women Who Built Without Credit. The host said she'd been following Stitched by Sacrifice since post number 4 and said she cried reading the one about the winter coat I cut up to make a muslin. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and hesitated. I'm not a speaker, I said. I'm not polished. She laughed. That's why we want you. You don't sound like a script. You sound like truth. So I went. And the second my voice hit that microphone, something I'd buried inside myself stood up. They asked about the blog, about why I'd started it. I didn't say Laura's name. I didn't need to. I guess I just got tired of watching history erase the hands that held the thread. I said, I thought maybe if I wrote it down, I'd remember myself before someone else rewrote me completely. The host sat back, eyes wide. You don't sound angry. I smiled. Oh, I am. But not the kind that burns things down. The kind that rebuilds with bricks people threw at you. The episode went viral in a day. After that came a small interview in the Sunday paper, a photo of me sitting in my kitchen, hands clasped, that same old thermos on the table beside me. The headline read, The Mother Behind the Curtain and the Pen. Still, I never gave Laura's name. Not once. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about removal. Removing the idea that I needed her permission to exist. Removing the shame she had quietly dressed me in like an outdated pattern. Removing the myth that only the loud deserve attention. 1 week later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. Your story made me call my mother. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She cried when I said thank you. No return address, just a signature. A daughter who finally saw. I sat in my garden, that letter in my lap, and stared out at the overgrown hedge. And for the first time since that awful party, I realized something beautiful. I was no longer telling Laura's story. I was telling mine, and people were listening. The idea came from a comment on the blog. You should make a line. Someone had written beneath a post about patching Laura's jeans with iron-on hearts when she was 8. A line of clothes made from real stories, not curated lies. I laughed at first. Me? I hadn't designed anything in decades. My hands knew function, not fashion. I stitched for need, not show. But that seed stayed with me. Then came Emily. She was a designer, young, sharp, local. She had emailed me after the podcast, asking to meet. Said she'd been raised by a single mother who scrubbed floors so she could study textiles. We sat in a little coffee shop off 3rd. She was nervous. I wasn't. I want to help you make something, she said. Not for your daughter. Not even about her. For you, for women like you. She slid a sketchbook across the table. Pages and pages of raw elegance. Aprons reimagined into wrap dresses. Uniform collars stitched into blazers. Pockets taken from utility pants and sewn into couture gowns. The designs weren't just clothes. They were stories. And I saw it right there on the page. My life turned inside out, turned into power. We called it Threadbare Truths. Every piece inspired by a blog post. Every tag carried a quote from the entry that birthed it. She cried over a failed pattern. So I stayed up remaking it while she slept. That became a midnight blue coat lined with script. You don't become a mother to be worried, but you hope someday not to be deleted. That became a simple linen dress with ghost stitching across the back. We didn't have investors or big PR, just borrowed studio space, donated scraps, and relentless hearts. And still, word got out. By the end of the month, we had over 300 RSVPs for the pop-up. Fashion students, local editors, boutique owners, survivors, supporters, strangers who said the blog made them call their mothers, their daughters, themselves. We scheduled it for the night before Fashion Week. No conflict, no competition, just correction. This wasn't about showing her up. It was about showing up for myself. For the women who had been background players in someone else's runway. 1 week before the event, Emily looked at me across the cutting table, her scissors paused midair. Do you think she'll come? I didn't even hesitate. No, I said, threading a needle. But she'll feel it. And that was enough, because this wasn't vengeance. No spotlight, no DJ, no champagne tower. Just a converted warehouse in the meatpacking district with mismatched chairs and floors that still smelled faintly of sawdust and dreams. At 6:58 p.m., I stood behind the curtain, palms steady. Emily stood beside me, all nerves and eyeliner. She kept checking her clipboard, her voice breathless. We've got press, local online. A few from the Fashion Week circuit, who came early. I nodded once calmly. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. At exactly 7 p.m., the lights dimmed, not for drama, but because the space only had 2 working overheads. And I stepped out. No music, just my voice. Good evening. I'm Margaret. I stitched every hem of this show, not alone, but with memories. I gestured behind me, and the show began. Each model stepped out, not with a strut, but a walk, slow, purposeful, eyes level with the crowd. They wore my history. An old janitor's smock reimagined as a floor-length coat with deep-stitched pockets and brass button closures. My nursing apron transformed into a belted wrap dress. The faded stains traced over in gold thread like war medals. Factory gloves sewn into the sleeves of a coat with a cuff folded open. One hand sewn shut, the other left free. Projected behind them were photos from my life. Grainy images. Me sewing at the kitchen table. Laura as a child pinning scraps to her dolls. A shot of my hands, aged, rough, steady, threading a needle. The final look walked out in silence. A cream-colored dress stitched from hospital scrubs and diner napkins. On the back, a message embroidered in looping cursive. She called me her past, but I made her future. The crowd didn't clap at first. They just stood. Then came the murmurs. Then the cameras. Then the applause. Slow, rising, honest. No artificial cheers, just the sound of people witnessing something they hadn't expected to feel in a room full of thread. When I stepped forward again, I didn't bow. I just spoke. This line isn't for the runway. It's for the hallway, the kitchen, the factory, the place where women give up their names to raise someone else's. Silence again. Then someone in the crowd shouted, "Tell us your name." I looked straight into the camera. I'm Margaret Ruth Carroll. I raised a fashion icon.
But this is what I raised for me.
The applause shook the floor. Somewhere in that crowd, someone was texting her. I could feel it. Laura would see the photos. She'd read the headlines. And for the first time, she wouldn't be able to pretend it was just a ghost haunting her PR strategy. She didn't even knock. The back door slammed open so hard it rattled the rack of finished pieces. Emily nearly dropped her sketch pad. The models froze mid-laugh. And there she was, Laura. Hair still camera perfect, foundation flawless, rage trembling beneath her designer trench like a live wire. I need to speak with you, she hissed. I didn't flinch. I didn't rise from the workbench, where I was folding the final dress back into its garment bag. You already are, I said softly. She looked around at the room, the scraps, the buzz still crackling from last night's show. Then back at me, her voice dropped low. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said. I told the truth. You weaponized it, she snapped. Every headline this morning is calling you the heart of Carol House, the mother behind the genius. Do you know what that does to my image? What it suggests? I stood up slowly, the fabric still in my hands. That you didn't stitch alone. She took a step forward. Closed now, nostrils flaring. You don't get to rewrite my story. I met her eyes, calm as ever. But you had no problem erasing mine. Silence cracked between us like a whip. She opened her mouth and closed it. Her fingers clenched into fists at her sides, knuckles white. You've humiliated me, she finally said.
No, I said.
I gave dignity to what you tried to bury. Her mouth twisted. People are going to think I'm a fraud. I never used your name, Laura. Not once. If you feel exposed, that's your own reflection screaming. She turned away, pacing now, eyes darting toward Emily and the others, trying hard to look anywhere but at us.
This has to stop, she said.
Take the blog down. Cancel the line. Issue a statement. Say it was fiction or a metaphor or… I took a slow step toward her. She stopped speaking. You're ashamed, I said quietly. Not of me, of the truth. She looked up, throat tight. Well, here's something to consider, I continued. Shame is a heavy fabric. You can wear it yourself. I'm done tailoring it for you. Tears gathered, but she blinked them back. Laura Carroll never cried publicly. Not even now, behind the threadbare curtains of her rewritten history. I made something beautiful, I added. Out of what you left behind. You made a scene, she spat. No, I said. You made a scene. I made a legacy. And then, for the first time since she was a child, Laura had no words. I walked past her calmly toward the open window, letting the late afternoon breeze touch my face. Behind me, I heard her breathe in to speak again and stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to because whatever she'd planned to say, apology, insult, control, it died in her throat when she realized the woman she'd been hiding was no longer hiding. She'd stepped out fully, finally. And nothing, no threat, no brand, no shame was going to sew her back in. It wasn't me who exposed her. It was one of her own. The story broke 3 days after our confrontation. Emily called me at 6:42 a.m., her voice sharp with something between awe and disbelief. Turn on your TV, she said. Channel 6. And there it was. Laura's face plastered on the screen under the headline. Carol caught copying viral designs traced to uncredited vintage sketches. But I didn't need to see the images to know what they were. I recognized them from memory. Because they weren't vintage, they were mine. The article told the story. A junior designer at Carol House, Jules, barely 23, eager, idealistic, had been digging through the company archives for a social media throwback project. They stumbled on a folder of early inspirations Laura claimed as her first collection. But Jules had been at our pop-up. And when they saw one of the old sketch photos on the blog's companion page, a faded notebook page dated 1978 with my sloppy teenage scrawl, they knew the sketches weren't Laura's. They were Margaret's, mine. Lines stolen, hem curves duplicated, even my exact titles. The Dish Rag Duchess, Night Shift Elegance, the Utility Gown. Jules posted the receipts anonymously. But the internet doesn't let truth stay buried. Not when it's hungry. Within hours, it trended. Hashtag threadbare truths. Hashtag stolen stitches. Hashtag Themother pattern. News outlets followed. Reporters called it a reckoning decades in the making. Fashion columnists who had once called Laura a prodigy now questioned her originality. And Laura, she went silent. No statement, no denial, no spin because there wasn't one that could survive the truth of a teenage girl's signature written in graphite at the bottom of a yellowed page. Designed by M. Carol, age 17. I sat in my kitchen with my tea cooling beside me, watching it all unfold. Not with glee, but with grief. Because even now, I wasn't angry that she used my designs. I was heartbroken that she never once said, "This came from my mother." I would have given them to her freely. I would have handed them over with pride, with love. I would have ironed them smooth and blessed her with every thread. But she took them in secret, claimed them as her genesis, and buried my name like something unmarketable until the truth unearthed itself, until my quiet voice made the ground shake beneath her heels. At noon, I received an email from Jules. Subject: I'm sorry she did that to you. Body: but I'm not sorry the world finally knows. You are the original. Always were. I didn't cry. I just reached for my needle and thread, pulled out the oldest fabric I owned, and began to stitch. Not for a runway, but for myself. Because it's one thing to be erased. It's another thing entirely to be remembered when you no longer ask for it. I didn't plan for it to be the last post, but when I sat down that evening, hands wrapped around my favorite chipped mug, the air thick with the smell of warm fabric and lavender oil, I knew I'd said all I needed to say. The world had listened, and more importantly, I had listened to myself. The photo came first. A single image, my old sewing machine, scratched, faithful, balanced on the same kitchen table where Laura once spilled tomato soup on a bolt of tools and cried like it was the end of her future. Behind the machine, a yellowed spool of thread. Next to it, the sketchbook she'd thrown into the donation box. And on the wall, a pinned piece of paper with a line in bold handwritten ink. I gave you the thread. What you stitched was always your choice. I wrote no caption, no hashtags, no tears, just pressed publish. By morning, the comments had flooded in. Hundreds, then thousands. Women saying goodbye to their own silence. Daughters reconciling, mothers releasing,